Hi everyone, hope you're well today, guys. Happy Sunday. I'm catching you just as we're catching a little bit of sunshine, so I thought this would bring some more vibrant colors to my video. Hopefully that will be the case today. We're going to be discussing the type of Jesus Christ for once, because weirdly enough, it's a question that I'm often asked, in relation to the INFJ topic. And also, recently I talked about 5 times that INFJs changed history, and I included Jesus Christ in those 5. So obviously, that was making the claim in a sort of implicit fashion that Jesus was an INFJ, and that seems not to be a consensus. So I thought maybe I'd just share some observations on his type. But before this, you know what I'm going to say. I have 2 things that I want to show you. My 2 books, the Ecstatic Soul, a book on the INFJ, and the Ecstatic Soul, my new novel, both available down below at the links. Thanks for your support. There's also a link to my Patreon page where you could join my Patreon supporters, and suggest any topic. Literally anything you want, you just ask me, as long as it's within the bounds of reason and legality, and I'd be more than happy to make a video on it. So it's something to be considered. In any case, the Jesus topic was not suggested by my Patreon supporters. I just felt that I would enjoy having a little reflection with you guys on this topic because, Jesus is a very influential figure in world history, and not only for religious folk, but for world culture, for a multiplicity of different culture, not only Western. He's one of the most influential individuals to have ever existed. So what's his type? Now, like I said in the video I'd released on the 5 occasions that INFJ has changed the game in history, I included him. There were some people who objected that he was more likely an F5 user, and that was kind of the main thrust of the sort of challenges to that video. But I have also known that in other discussions, in other circles, Jesus is sometimes seen as an extrovert, so again, not INFJ. So that's what I want to talk about. So really, we're going to take it step by step and see what type we arrive at for Jesus. One first observation that I would make is, if you're a Christian and you're not a Unitarian, you believe that Jesus is literally the Son of God. So you believe in the Trinity, and that Jesus is the second person of the Trinity, and therefore Jesus is divine as well as human. So that could create complications in terms of typing, because presumably he's the Son of God, or God is untypable. If you're divine, can you really be typed? I doubt that you could just make that claim. But insofar as Jesus is a man, since he is one essence and 2 persons, then you could arguably just look at the historical Jesus and give your opinion on that. So in any case, we're going to focus on the historical Jesus. I think that the first thing that just comes to mind is quite clear. Jesus was very much likely an F user because of the emphasis on values, and the emphasis on moral behavior, and the emphasis on charity, and everything that sort of undergirds Christianity as a religion that has a strong element of love, and in addition to justice and fellowship in it. And that the way in which Jesus's rhetoric, the way that Jesus related to other people, and what he literally said, seems to be just suffused with feeling, in such a way that I think the T hypothesis can sort of be left aside quite quickly. Whether it's FI or FE that we're dealing with, again, I don't really understand the INFP arguments. Like, I do get comments to that effect, again, like I said, regularly enough. And it's an interesting hypothesis. I would just like to hear more about it. But usually people just say, oh yeah, like, he's an INFP. And I'm like, okay, but what's the argument? Because how could Jesus be an FI dominant? The thing that people need to understand is that a proper, real FI dominant is not someone who is cognitively geared towards preaching for other people to embrace or to follow him, or to follow his precepts. And maybe we just can say his system, but let's say his precepts and his vision. He's not someone, or they're not the kind of person who would say, come with me, leave out everything that you possess and come with me. There's something about the FI morality that is very much like that, recoils at the idea that you're going to spread your message and win adherence. Even if it's subtle, even if it's not direct, this is not something that FI pursue, especially FI dominants. Very much subjectively experience their morality. They justify their morality to themselves. Not to say that they're not happy if they see that other people have the same moral norms, but the idea that they would just spread it out in a conscious manner and militantly do it is just really antithetical to FI users and FI dominance in particular. So it's something that's probably a bit underestimated, but this is a good way to distinguish between FI and FE, okay? So I think that from this perspective, we're dealing with an FE user in the case of Jesus. Whether he's NI or SI is another interesting question. There's no way of being absolutely certain. It's true that SI has kind of a distorted and biased description in the communities, usually as almost as a function that's kind of inherently conservative and orderly and doesn't like chaos and doesn't like revolution. So from that perspective, given what Jesus ushered, and the revolutions that he brought about, and the rebellious streak in his preaching and in his own life, we're very much inclined, if we take that definition of SI, to reject it and to embrace NI for Jesus. And if we have FE and NI combined, then, well, as two highly developed functions, we're already dealing with either an INFJ or an ENFJ. That being said, like I said, I don't know if we can be absolutely certain that NI is the function in question. I think that, if you like, given what we know of his life, the NI narrative provides a much more sort of clean and coherent and unproblematic story of Jesus, than if he was an SI user. Because it is true that although SI is immensely more complicated than just a conservative function, it does tend to be more conservative than NI in the sense that its worldview is, for reasons that I'm not going to go into in this video, is a bit more rigid, is a bit more static than the NI worldview, which is more fluid by definition. Now, that's not to say that it's better or worse, but Jesus' worldview was not static. It was very much a dynamic worldview, and it created immense tremors in world history. So I would side with NI in this case. Provides a better story, provides a more convincing story. The really, at the end of the day, then, for me, the question mark, the real question mark, is whether he was an INFJ or an ENFJ. And here I have to admit, there are people who see him as more so having been an ENFJ, and I think that makes a lot of sense, actually. I would say that between INFJ and ENFJ, it's really 50-50. It could even be slightly more of a 60-40 in favor of ENFJ, just because from experience, even enlightened INFJs, like the way that I described them in my book, they engage FE to collaborate with others with a view towards refining and asserting their vision. Now, if you think about it, Jesus is exactly doing that. So we could see Jesus as an enlightened INFJ, an INFJ that resolved the tension between his different functions and attained sort of transcended alienation. So it's possible to see him like that, and it's very strong temptation. But at the same time, it could also be argued that at the end of the day, if you look at Jesus, he led a very extroverted life. and an INFJ that is leading a very extroverted life, the problem is there is a risk that they end up repressing their introverted functions, which are in a way their more natural functions. And what happens, again from a Jungian viewpoint, is that if you repress your introverted functions, they fall into the unconscious, and then they re-emerge in fashions that tend to be autonomous, arbitrary, and unhealthy. And we don't get this impression with Jesus. So it seems that he was leading an extroverted life in a way that did not tire him out or stress him out. And we're talking about the historical Jesus, and human Jesus, not the divine Jesus. Because if you were to look at the divine Jesus, you might always think, well, he's divine, so he doesn't get tired or something like that, or stressed. But if we're looking at the historical Jesus, it just seems that he led an extroverted life in a way that seemed to conform with his adaptation to reality, with his orientation to reality, with the directedness of his action in reality. And so for these reasons, the ENFJ hypothesis, where you still have a strong element of the introverted intuition and the very developed, obviously prevalent element of extroverted feeling, FE, which I think is just all over Jesus's life and sayings and actions, and the consequences of his, of what he did. The ENFJ hypothesis is just basically just as strong. So I would get to a stage where I would say pretty straightforwardly, Jesus, either an ENFJ or a non-alienated INFJ, i.e. an enlightened INFJ. I think it's between the two, but I'd love to know what you think in the comments, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, these thoughts I shared. I really want to hear what you think, because some of you doubtless will have thoughts. Again, like I said, Jesus is an important figure for a lot of reasons. And I'm sure that all of us have at one point or another wondered. In the meantime, I'll see you next week. Don't forget you can support me on Patreon. See you guys.